Bikurim Perik Beis Mishnah Aleph. Hatruma v'abikurim chayavan alei misa v'chomesh v'asurim lezorim v'hem nechsei koyin v'oilim be'echad u'meya. The first part of this parak is going to compare Truma, Bikurim, and Ma'aser Sheni with one another, what they have in common, and what the differences are. Obviously, they're all different mitzvahs, so they're not going to have everything in common, but they do have a lot of common things. Truma v'abikurim, Truma and Bikurim have the following halachas in common. Chayavan alei misa, a zor who eats Truma or Bikurim is Chayav Misa B'dei Shemayim if he eats it b'mezid, and he's also Chayav Chomesh if he eats it b'shegeg without knowing that the food was Truma or Bikurim. So he must pay a kohen the value of what he ate plus a fifth, which is a quarter of the value, which is a fifth of the final total. We explained this earlier in Trumas, that a zor who eats Truma or Bikurim has to pay the value of what he ate to the kohen who owned it, and he pays the Chomesh to any kohen he wants. If the Truma had not yet been given to a kohen, he also pays its basic value to any kohen of his choice. Ba'asurim lazorim, Truma and Bikurim are forbidden to non-kohen to eat, since the Mishnah just taught that a non-kohen is punished with Misa B'dei Shemayim for eating Truma or Bikurim. It's a davar parshat that it's asur for him to eat it. So why does the Mishnah have to be most of this, that it's asur lazorim? So the Mishnah adds this halacha to teach that a non-kohen may not even eat the smallest share of Truma or Bikurim, although he may not be punished with Misa B'dei Shemayim or to pay the Chomesh if he eats less than a kazayas, afal pikein, it's still usher to eat that. This is the lashon of the Rav. Asum lazarm b'chinam hishnuya lechera. There's no need to mention this. The kevan shachayav and le'misa v'chaymish pshita shasur lazarm. LeRav Yechanan the Omar Chata Shir Osam and Torah. There's a machlekes in the Gemara. Rav Yechanan Rish Lakish in Yuma Dav Ayin Gimlom and Beis. If Chati Shir is Osam and Torah, meaning if a person has less than a kazayas, let's say, of an Isser, is there any Isser involved in that? Let's say a Shir of Chaylev. In order for him to be over the Isser of Chaylev, he needs to eat a kazayas. Let's say he eats less than a kazayas. So is that Osir? So it's definitely Osam and Darabban. The question is it Osam and Torah? So Rabbi Yechanan the Omar Chati Shir Osam and Torah, according to Rabbi Yechanan, who says that Chati Shir is Osam and Torah, Matin Lamemra Detnan Asum Lazarm L'Chati Shir. It's coming to teach, this Mishnah is coming to teach us that even according to Rabbi Yechanan, it's going to be Osir Chati Shir, Shu Osam and Torah, and by Le Mitzav Lechemish, obviously there's no Enshim, because the Enshim can only be applied once there's the Shir of the Isser V'hein Nechsei Koyin, and they're completely the property of the Koyin to whom they are given. Truma and Bikurim become the personal property of the Koyin to whom they are given, rather than being the Lashem, so to speak. He's able to sell it, to buy avodim and karkois and behemoths tmeyas. There's no kedusha to it that's Lashem. It's like his shirts and his pants. V'oilam, not big dekuna, it's like his socks. V'oilam be'echad u'meya, and the truma or bikurim that become mixed with the dvarim hamutarim are bottled in 101. That is, if one part of truma or bikurim becomes mixed with 100 parts of davar hamutar, the truma or bikurim is bottled, and the mixture, the taruvis, is going to be mutter even to non-kehanim, as we explained by Arichas in Masechta Truma. U'te'unin rechitzas yadayim. Here's something interesting, that they need to wash your hands before you eat it. Before kohen eats truma or bikurim, he must wash his hands. Midrabanan, a person's hands are a sheni latuma. If a sheni latuma touches kachim like truma or bikurim or basar kachim, it makes the food that he touched also to be eaten. Therefore, before eating truma or bikurim, a kohen must remove the tumah from his hands by washing them in a process called netilas yadayim, in which water is poured from a keli onto the hands. In order to get the kohanim into the habit of doing netilas yadayim, the chachamim were gozed that any yid who eats bread, even if it's not kodesh, must do netilas yadayim first, which is the basic halacha of netilas yadayim that we have today. There's another halacha also of herav shemesh, that in order to eat truma or bikurim, they require sunset, which means that after a kohen becomes tameh, he's tovel in a mikveh, and he can't eat the truma right away. He must wait until nightfall before he may eat the truma or bikurim. Although once he's tovel in the mikveh, it removes the tumah, a little bit of tumah remains until nightfall. For this reason, the kohen who is tovel must wait until nightfall before he may eat the truma or bikurim. So the question in the Gemara, when's the best time to be tovel? Is it the best time to be tovel earlier in the day to get rid of the tumah as early as possible? Or is it best to be toivel later in the day, closer to Shkia or Tzeisek Achavim, closer to the end of the day as possible, so there shouldn't be a chance of him becoming Tameh again? So it depends how you want to look at it. It depends what you're choishish for. These are halachas that apply to Truma or Bikurim, but not to Ma'aser Sheni. Someone who ate Ma'aser Sheni b'mezid outside Yerushalayim is not mechuyev to pay. Is not mechuyev misa b'dei Shamayim, and he doesn't have to pay a chaimish either. Ma'aser Sheni may be eaten in Yerushalayim even by non-Kehanim, and Ma'aser Sheni does not completely belong to its owner. The owner of Ma'aser Sheni does not have the rights to use it for whatever he wants. He must take it to Yerushalayim and eat it here, as we explained throughout Masechta Ma'aser Sheni. Although the Torah allows him to be paid with money, the money has kedushas Ma'aser, and it's miyuchad. It's a huktzah for this inyan, and you can't use it for whatever you want. A Ma'aser Sheni will also become batal b'roiv, and there's no chiyuv to wash one's hands before eating Ma'aser Sheni. As explained before, a person's hands are Sheni la tumma. Something with this level of tumma can contaminate Truma, Bikurim, and other kachim, but not Ma'aser Sheni. So there's no need to wash your hands or do Netilas Yadayim before Ma'aser Sheni. Obviously, if it's bread, there's another chiyuv to wash your hands. Avada, there's no reason why he wouldn't be mechuyev in that. And a tamei person who's tevlin in a mikvah may eat Ma'aser Sheni right away. There are other halachas that apply to Truma and Bikurim, but do not apply to Ma'aser Sheni. For example, it's possible to be paid the Ma'aser Sheni with money which you cannot do with Truma or Bikurim, but the Mishnah doesn't mean to list every chiluk, but just a few of them. The question is why dafka. These are the outstanding ones, obviously, that the Mishnah felt the need to mention them. Mishnah base. Yesh b'maiser b'Bikurim asher ein kein b'Truma. There are some halachas that apply to Ma'aser Sheni and Bikurim, but do not apply to Truma. Shahamaisa v'Bikurim to unan havas makan. Ma'aser Sheni and Bikurim must be brought to a specific place, and the owner has to bring them to Yerushalayim, and they must be eaten. Well, Bikurim has to be brought to the Beis HaMikdash, and they're eaten by a kohen. And they both require a type of kriya, a type of vidoy, a declaration that the owner declares by Meiser. The owner declares every 4th and 7th year of the 7-year Shemitah cycle that he has dealt with his Ma'aser Sheni in the required manner. On the last day of Pesach, he says the vidoy Meiser, as we explained in Ma'aser Sheni at the end of Perek Hey. And when he brings Bikurim to the Beis HaMikdash, he's carried the parsha of Arami Eved Abi, which is Mikra Bikurim, which we spoke about in the first parak, and we'll discuss later on in the third parak as well. Vasurum la'oinain, they're forbidden to an oinain. Someone's close relative has died. One of the Shiva Krevim was nifter, but wasn't yet buried, or was buried that day. There's different shitas exactly what exactly is an oinain, because the pasuk says by Meiser, Lo yachalti ba'ayni mimenu, I did not eat it in aninus, and by Bikurim it says v'samachta b'chol ha'toiv, it has to be eaten in a state of simcha, and somebody who's a oinain, Rechman san, is not in a matzav of simcha. Reb Shimon Matir, Reb Shimon says that an oinain is mutter to eat Bikurim because the Torah refers to it as truma, and truma is mutter, even though it says v'samachta b'chol ha'toiv, maybe it's referring to the zman simcha, but an oinain is allowed to eat Bikurim. B'chayav b'biur. Ma'aser Sheni and Bikurim require biur that every 4th and 7th year of the 7-year Shemitah cycle, any Ma'aser Sheni or Bikurim that wasn't eaten in Yerushalayim must be destroyed, as we mentioned. Reb Shimon says that one does not have to destroy Bikurim. Reb Shimon holds that Bikurim are like Truma, which does not have a din of biur, but it's given to a kohen, as we mentioned earlier. And we mentioned Reb Shimon also in Ma'aser Sheni and Perek Hey. Any amount of Ma'aser Sheni Bikurim that becomes mixed with a davar hamutter in Yerushalayim and not be eaten outside Yerushalayim, no matter how much davar hamutter it's mixed in. It won't become batal b'roiv. The entire mixture, the entire taruvis, must be treated as Ma'aser Sheni Bikurim, which may be eaten only in Yerushalayim, because we learned that when you have a taruvis with enough davar hamutter, l'choira, the davar ha'asr should become batal, and the mixture is then mutter. The taruvis is then mutter. If Ma'aser Sheni Bikurim was batal, the entire taruvis should be mutter to be eaten outside Yerushalayim. However, the general rule of bidl does not take place if the forbidden item is a davar sheyesh lematirim. That if it's easily available, situations in which the forbidden item is mutter. This category includes Ma'aser Sheni and Bikurim because they're mutter to be eaten in Yerushalayim. Therefore, if either of these foods becomes mixed with the davar hamutter, they're not batal regardless of how much heter is present in the mixture. If if seeds from the prohibited mixture from the davar also were planted in Yerushalayim, their growths would be forbidden to be eaten outside Yerushalayim, and they'd even be forbidden to non-kohanim and animals. Zok the Rav, Ma'aser Sheni Bikurim she'oisrin taruvasam l'cholshu g'dilei nam da'asurin. Ma'aser Sheni and Bikurim, the taruvas is also b'kolshu, and even if the seeds that grew from them and the plants that grew from them are also asur, af lazarim l'behema asurim. In Bikurim heim asur ma'taruvas lazarim. If it's Bikurim is like Truma, so it's also for Zar to eat. The Meiser who Oyser as a Taruvas lebehema. Meiser cannot be eaten by a behema, it has to be eaten by the person. The late time of Dafkalin and Lechel Chutz Yerushalayim with Oyser Machal Shehu. Don't say that specifically for the Indian of not being allowed to be eaten in outside Yerushalayim, that's where it asks Bakal Shehu. The Lai Milsech Shivi Davar Shesh Lematirin, because Legame this halacha it's also considered Davar Shesh Lematirin. Kem Sheyachal Ochel Mem Yerushalayim. Afilu Be'elef Lebatli. Because it has to be eaten specifically in Yerushalayim, so I feel a be'elef loy bottle. It's not even going to be a bottle in 1,000. Avalesar teruvas l'zarmu behema. The isra zars behema ein lematirin. So the isra of zars and behema, meaning the isra for a behema to eat the meiser, or the isra for a zar to eat bikurim, there's no heter for that bichlal. So there's no matirin. So sal kadai d'chamina, I might think loy asur taravasam b'cholshu. So therefore, I might think that the taruvas won't be also b'kolshu. Kamash v'lan, the chiddush of the Mishnah is coming to teach us that Kevin lechal ala taruvas shem bikurim meiser le'asur l'achal l'chutz Yerushalayim. Since there is a bikurim, the shem bikurim is chal on this taruvas because it's afilu be'elef le'bottle, it's going to be also to eat it outside Yerushalayim. So too le'inyan zeh le'asur l'achal l'zar m'hem bikurim ele behema mu meiser. The same way it's also to eat outside Yerushalayim, it's also going to be also for to be eaten by a behema, and it's also going to be also if it's bikurim, it's going to be also for a zar to eat it. Reb Shimon matir, and Reb Shimon says it's mutter. Reb Shimon holds, Reb Shimon paskins, that the gidulim, the growth of actual meiser sheni bikurim, are mutter to be eaten outside Yerushalayim, and certainly to be eaten by zarim or behemoths. The growths of bikurim seeds that were planted may be eaten by non-kaihanim, and the growths of meiser sheni seeds that were planted may be fed to animals. Both set of growths are permitted to be eaten even outside Yerushalayim, despite the fact that they can be easily taken inside the city and eaten there. Even if there is a davar sheyesh matirim, according to Reb Shimon, since these growths do not contain any of the original meiser sheni bikurim but are entirely new plants, they're mutter in every respect. But this is only legabe the gidulim, mashe ein kein legabe the taruvas. Avol b'taruvas atzma meider Reb Shimon. And Zok the Rav, if it ain't halacha Reb Shimon b'kulam masnisim, the halacha is not like Reb Shimon in any of these mishnayos. So harei elu b'meiser b'bikurim mashe ein kein b'truma. All these halachas that apply to meiser sheni and bikurim do not apply to truma. Truma does not have to be brought to any specific place. It does not require any kind of kriya or a beer. It may be eaten by a oinain, and it becomes mutter when it's in a taruvas as long as it's batal keholchasa. Mishnah Gimel. Yesh b'truma of meiser mashe ein kein b'bikurim. There are halachas that apply to truma and meiser sheni, but not to bikurim. Shahat truma v'hameiser oisun esagayran. Truma and meiser sheni, also the produce that has been processed. The once produce has been completely processed, eating its usher until trumas and meiser have been separated from it, and it has a din of tevel. Yesh lahem shir, they have a required amount. Truma is usually a 50th of the crop, which is 2%. Meiser sheni is the fairish in the Torah, a 10th. And they apply to all kinds of produce. Trumas and meisers must be separated from grain, grapes, and olives according to the Torah, and from all other types of edible produce according to the Rabbanon. When there is a base of mikdash, when there's not a base of mikdash, trumas and meisers still have to be separated even bisman hazeh. Meiser sheni may not be eaten even in Yerushalayim, but there's no base of mikdash. Instead, you have to be paid onto money and throw the money into the Yam HaMelech, which we discussed in Sechta Meiser Sheni. They apply to the produce of sharecroppers, tenant farmers, sekrikin, which are thieves that steal land, and a regular gazlan. Although these people do not own the land in which the produce grow, they're still mechuyev in these mitzvahs. They're still chayav, meaning the parents, not them. I don't know if they're doing mitzvahs. Maybe they do the mitzvahs, but the halacha is like this. The halacha that we're talking about in this Mishnah is that specifically these halachas apply to truma and meiser Masha'en can be Bikurim. Even processed produce may be eaten before Bikurim have been separated from it. Bikurim can consist of any amount, no matter how small, and Bikurim are separated only from Shivas Haminim, and Bikurim have a specific place. They have to be brought to the Beis HaMikdash, and they're brought only by the person who owns the land on which they grew. If we learned in Parak Aleph Mishnah Beis, for all the people that are not able to bring Bikurim because it doesn't belong to them, if they don't own the property, they cannot bring Bikurim, or they will not bring Bikurim. Mishnah Dalet. And there are halachas that apply to Bikurim, but not to Truma and Ma'aser Sheni. Bikurim can be designated, or nikna, which means acquired, that the fruits have, or kind of the kedusha of Bikurim, while the produce is still attached to the ground. When we're going to see later on in the beginning of Paragimel, the ideal procedure is that when a farmer sees fruits beginning to ripen on a tree or on the ground, he designates them as Bikurim way before he cuts it off. A person can designate all the produce of his field as Bikurim without leaving any for himself. He's responsible for them. That if one's Bikurim becomes lost or ruined before he brings them to the Beis HaMikdash, he must replace them with others, as we spoke in the previous parak, Mishnah Ches and Tes. Utunu carbon, and they require a carbon, and one who brings Bikurim to the Beis HaMikdash must bring a carbon as well. He has to bring a carbon shlamim before leaving Yerushalayim. However, if he does not bring the carbon, he will still make the mitzvah of Bikurim. There's a mitzvah of a carbon that he has to, because it says v'samachta b'chol ha'toiv, and the pasuk also says v'zavachta shlamim v'chalta shlam v'samachta. Just like over there it's a shlamim, so over here it means a shlamim b'shir, and it requires a song. The Leviim sing when Bikurim are brought to the Beis HaMikdash. Namar kan v'chol ha'toiv v'namar lahalon k'shir ha'gov and yafa kol ha'meitav nagain. And the Mishnah is going to be mefarish and Paragimel that there was a whole process and a parade and a procedure in how they brought to Bikurim, and there was a lot of singing and music involved. It was very exciting, freiliche procedure and process, parade, and it was a chiyuv, it was a big chelik of the mitzvah. Masha'en came, Ma'aser Sheni, Hagam, you're bringing it to the Beis HaMikdash, or Truma, you're eating it in your backyard, you don't even have to go to the Beis HaMikdash, so there's no din that you have to bring a shlamim, and there's no din that you have to have a shir. Obviously, the understanding of the mitzvah of Ma'aser Sheni is to give the person the ability to go to the Beis HaMikdash, but the process of simcha v'samachta b'chol ha'toiv that we find by Bikurim is specific to Bikurim. It has to be brought bisman simcha, and people that are not in a state of simcha are not allowed to have it, right? As we spoke earlier. But there's a big focus on simcha in the mitzvah of Bikurim, as ain't by the other things, by Truma and Ma'aser. Utnufa velina, and Bikurim require waving. The owner of the Bikurim and the kohen hold the Bikurim together and wave them in all directions. They move the basket containing the Bikurim in each of the four directions, in north, south, east, and west, up and down, as we're going to see later on in Paragimel as well. Velina, and they require staying overnight. When someone brings Bikurim to the Beis HaMikdash, he may not leave Yerushalayim before the morning, but must spend the night in the city. The chiyuv of Velina applies whenever someone brings a carbon in the Beis HaMikdash. So, although Bikurim itself is not a carbon, but because Bikurim requires a carbon to be brought together with it, it also requires lina. So these halachas do not apply to Truma or Ma'aser Sheni. For Truma, Ma'aser Sheni can be separated only from produce that has already been picked. It's detached from the ground. One cannot make his whole crop into Truma or Ma'aser Sheni, but must leave some as regular produce, because it says Reishis, the Gancha, and you need to have Reishis Shashirah in the Karm. Reishis means that there's an Achros also, there's something that follows afterwards. So Reishis, you need to have something with Shirah in the Karm, that it's recognizable that there's something, that this is first and there's also a second. But Bikurim doesn't say that, so you could give your whole field as Bikurim. And if Truma or Ma'aser Sheni is lost or ruined, you don't have to replace it. The halachas of Karban, Shir, Tnufa, and Lina, which are related to the Beis HaMikdash and its Karbanis, have no relevance in the mitzvah of Truma and Ma'aser Sheni. Weiter Mishnah Hey. Trumas Ma'aser, Shavel Bikurim, B'shtei Drachim, Ulu Truma B'shtei Drachim. The Mishnah deals with Trumas Ma'aser, which has not yet been mentioned. When Ma'aser Rishon is separated from the produce and given to the Levi separates a tenth of that and gives that tenth to the Kohen. This portion is called Trumas Ma'aser. So Trumas Ma'aser, Shavel Bikurim B'shtei Drachim, Ulu Truma B'shtei Drachim. Trumas Meiser is similar to Bikurim in two ways and similar to Truma in two ways. Nitelas Menator ala Tame. Trumas Meiser may be separated from Tahor produce on behalf of Tame produce. If someone has both Tame and Tahor produce, it's also to separate Truma from the Tahor for the sake of the Tame produce, even though the Tahor produce is better quality to the Tame produce because of the halacha of Minamukov, which says that when Truma is designated, it must be touching or near the produce for which it is being designated. The Chacham were concerned that someone who separates Truma from Tahor produce for the sake of the Tame produce might be afraid to put a pile next to each other so it shouldn't become Tame. So the Chacham were geyser that Truma may never be separated from anything it's not Minamukov. So the Chacham were geyser that Truma may never be separated from Tahor on behalf of Tame. However, this din Rabbanon is only specific to Truma and not Truma's Meiser, because the halacha of Minamukov applies only to Truma, as we'll see later on. So it's mutter to separate Truma's Meiser from Meiser Rishon, which is Tahor, from Meiser Rishon that's Tameh. It's not a problem. Nitelas Menator ala Tameh v'shalom Minamukov, and may also be separated from produce that's not near the produce for which it is being separated. Ki Bikurim do not have the halachas of Tahor ala Tameh or Shalom and Amukib. Now, there is an issue with Bikurim being Tameh because you have to bring it to the Beis HaMikdash. We already mentioned that if it became Tameh, so then you are Noifetz as Hasal. However, Trumas Meiser forbids produce that has been processed. And once produce is processed, eating is forbidden until Trumas Meiser has been designated. V'yesh Lashir has a specific amount, which is 1/10 Ketruma. In these two ways, Trumas Meiser is like Trumas. Interesting. The Mishnah of it says al tarbala aser oimdais, and Rashi explains over there that when you separate Meiser, you shouldn't do it ba'oimid like you do Truma. By Truma, you take off a shear. You don't measure it. We mentioned the Masechta Truma, so you don't measure the Truma when you're taking it off, but you do measure the Meiser because Meiser is 1/10. Truma doesn't have a din of 1/10 b'chlal. Not only that, but it's mafurish in the Mishnah that you could give a 40th, you could give a 50th, you could give a 60th. Beishamai hold even a 30th, which obviously is a bigger shear, but there's a variety of shiurim al kalpanim that you could give by Truma. Mashain came a Meiser. You want to give him a tana to the Levi, you give whatever you want. You could give him tzedakah, you could give whatever you want. But midine Meiser, Meiser in and of itself is a shear, it's 1/10. That's what it is. Mishnah Vav. Esrig shava le'ilam b'shloish hadrachim u'liyarik b'derech echad. And esrig is like the fruit of a tree in 3 ways, and it's like a vegetable in 1 way. What are we talking about over here? How does esrig? We'll fall tarayna esrig into the Mishnah Bikurim. From this point in the parak until the end, we're not going to be discussing Bikurim. We're going to be comparing and contrasting different things. For halachic purposes, it's necessary to identify the years to which certain produce belongs. For example, if produce started growing in the 2nd year of the Shemitah cycle, but it's picked in the 3rd year, we need to be able to know whether it's a 2nd year produce, and Meiser Sheni must be separated, or 3rd year produce, which Meiser Ani must be separated. In general, the determining factor for fruit is when they start to grow, but the determining factor for vegetables is when they are picked. For example, if fruit and vegetables began to grow in the 2nd year, but were picked in the 3rd year, the fruit would be attributed to the 2nd year, but the vegetables would be considered as if they grew in the 3rd year. The esrig, though, is a special case. The Mishnah teaches that in some respects, the year of an esrig is determined when it starts to grow like fruit, and in some respects, the year is determined by which it was picked like vegetables. The esrig is basically a fruit because it grows on a tree. However, unlike other trees, the esrig cannot survive on rainwater alone, but requires water from other sources. Like the Gemara Taina says that we daven for mayim because these dalad minim, they grow by mayim and they need mayim to grow. So Vice says that the regular geshem is not good enough for it; they need extra water to grow. So again, esrig shavalilim b'shleisha drachim, and esrig is like the fruit of a tree in 3 ways. Uliyarik b'darech echad, shavalilim ba'orla. It's like the fruit of a tree, legabe hilchis orla, the isra of orla. If esrig starts to grow during a tree's first 3 years, it has a din of Arla, even if it's picked in the 4th year, because regarding Arla, we follow the year of the esrig's growth, like fruit, and not the year which it was picked, as in the case of vegetables. Uba Ravai, similarly, an esrig is like the fruit of a tree with respect to the Hilchas Ravai. If an esrig starts to grow during the tree's 4th year, it must be eaten in Yerushalayim, even if it's picked in the 5th year, because regarding Ravai, we follow the year of the esrog's growth like fruit, and not the year in which it's picked like vegetables. Ubeshvias, similarly, it's like the fruit of a tree with respect to the hilchas shmita. So if an esrog starts to grow during the 6th year of the shmita cycle, we view it as non-shmita produce, even if it's picked during shmita, because regarding shmita, we follow the year of the esrog's growth like fruit, and not the year in which it was picked like vegetables. However, it's like vegetables in one way, because when you separate trumas and maasros, we go when it was picked. At the time of its picking, that's when you have a chiyuv of maaser. If an esrog starts to grow in the 2nd year of the 7-year shmita cycle, but it's picked in the 3rd year, so legabe maaser, we look at it when you pick it. When is whatever the 3rd year is, so that's maaser ani, rather than the 2nd year. Even though it grew in the 2nd year, but you pick it in the 3rd year, so then you by maaser goes bosar likitasa. Bosar goes after when you pick it. Goes after likitasa. When maaser onim, fine. Divrei Rami Gamliel. That's what Rami Gamliel says. Reb Lezer says Shavalilam b'chol davar. An esrog tree is a regular tree. Nothing. Any halacha that we were medama an esrog to vegetables. So Reb Lezer is not true. An esrog tree is similar to the fruit of a tree in every respect, even trumas hamaisos. Therefore, an esrog that started to grow in the 2nd year, but was picked in the 3rd year, is attributed to the 2nd year and must have ma'aser sheni separated from it, even if it's in the 3rd year. None of these interesting halachas that gabe esrog by when it comes to ma'aser. Okay, Mishnah Zayin. Dam mahal cheshtayim. Shovel ledam behem alachsher sazron. V'dam hasharet ein chayav alav. The blood of those who walk on two was referring to people. So why are we referring to people as mahal cheshtayim? The Mishnah uses the unusual expression of those who walk on two instead of people to teach that even the blood of a living person who can walk on 2 feet is going to have the same halacha as a chalal. A chalal is a dead body, is a corpse. So shavel adam behem al hakshar says Rav is similar to animal blood in regard to food fit to become tamei in order to be machshir zroim. The halacha is that food cannot become tamei unless it is first touched by one of the 7 liquids, which are mentioned in Machshirin in Perek Vav, which include blood. Yad shochatam, the way to remember them is yayin, dvash, mayim, shemen, chalav, tal, dvash, and mayim. Yad shochatam. Those are the ways that we can remember what the zayin mashkas are. So if food touched animal blood or human blood, and later it came into contact with the source of tumah, it becomes tameh. V'dam hasharetz ein chayav alav. However, human blood is similar to the blood of a sheretz in that one is not mechuyev kares if he eats it. In legabe this, human blood is different from animal blood because one who eats animal blood is mechuyev kares. Masha ein kain dam hasharetz is like dam odam, which a person would not be mechuyev kares for. Not that he should do it, but he's not going to be mechuyev. The einish is not going to be the same. Mishnah Ches. So here we get into interesting territory. Koi. Chavav Yud. Pronounced koi, some pronounce it as kvi. A koi is a cross between a goat and a deer. A goat's a behema and a deer is a chaya. Or is an independent species that bears similarities to both goats and deer. So it's a nechluku by chachmei Yisrael, sachamachlekas chachamim. Yesh emrshu ayal habor, some wild type of ram. Yesh emrshu tayash abalat tzviyo. So Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky and Emes Yankov, so in the name itself there's almost a machlekes how to pronounce it. Is it koi? Is it kvi? So they say a ma'isa that Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky and Emes Yaakov on this Mishnah, he gives a proper diktuk, the right way how to say it. For all the diktuk people, they can check it up in Emes Yaakov. They say a ma'isa that there was a bacha that was learning with Rabbi Mishur Soloveitchik and Brisk, and Rabbi Mishur was saying koi, and the bacha kept on saying kvi, and Rabbi Mishur keeps on correcting the bacha. So he says to him, "Why do you keep on correcting me? You want me to call your grandfather Sefer Chadusha Reb Chaim Halevi or Chadusha Reb Chaim Haloi?" So I say kvi, like Halevi, although it's probably very, very not mistaber to say that there's any reality in the diktuk shabai. That's why you have to look at Emes Yankov. So koi yesh bedrachim shava lechaya. A A koi has ways in which it's like a chaya. V'yesh bedrachim shavu lebehema, and it has ways in which it's like a behema. V'yesh bedrachim shavu lebehema ula chaya, and there are ways in which it's similar to both the behema and the chaya. V'yesh bedrachim shein shavu leila behema v'leila chaya, and then it also has ways which is not like a behema or a chaya at all. So min Torah, we got to know that there's behemoths and chayas. So behemoths are sheep, goats, and cattle, and chayas are wild animals, species that are not commonly raised but are found in the wild, like deer and gazelles. So it's unknown what the classification of this animal would be. Like we said, that could be it's an animal that's an ayal habar. It could be that it's a ta'ish habal latzviya. Yesh omrim that it's a bria b'fnei atzma. So this is what it's about. Mishnah Tes. Ketzad shava lechaya. How is this animal similar to a chaya? Damay ton kisui kedam chaya. If this koi or kvi is shechted, so it requires kisui adam, just like the blood of a chaya or a bird. It's not a bird, as everyone knows, but when someone shechts a chaya or a bird, is mechuyev to cover the blood with earth or a similar substance. This mitzvah applies only to chayas and birds and not to behemoths. Since a koi might be a chaya, so we might need to do kisui adam misafik, and safik deraisa lechumra. And many of the sveikas that we're going to have, we can say that the psak is going to be lechumra because it's safik deraisa lechumra. However, because the chiyuv to cover the koi's blood is based only on the safik, you would not make the bracha. Reciting a bracha for no reason is a transgression. It's a problem. It's forbidden to recite brachas misafik. So that's a whole shaylan of itself. Safik brachas lahakal, but there are times when the Stipler says in brachas that first of all there is a shita that the concept of brachas is the raisa. The nusach of brachas is probably not. The concept you have to look in the Pnei Yeshua in the beginning of Keitzam Avarcham and brachas. But the Stipler says that there's a big difference between the Birkas Hanenin and the Birkas HaMitzvahs. In Birkas Hanenin, the Gemara says that somebody doesn't make a bracha, it's kilu gezel, it's aviv. It's kilu, he's stealing from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So a person who doesn't make a bracha before he eats something, it's gezel, it's gezel. So in order to be matter the gezel, he needs to make a bracha. So for that has a din, the eraisa the ramifications. If a person puts on tzitzis or puts on tefillin and does kisui adam, doesn't make a bracha, he's still yet to the mitzvah. He loses out the mitzvah of making a bracha on the mitzvah, but be'etzem, he still has the reshus, he has the ability to make the bracha on. He has the ability to be mekayim the mitzvah, afal pi he didn't make the bracha. Ve'in shechter neitzav yamtiv, he may not shechter in yamtiv mitzad safik. Why? Because it's also lachatris, it's damai, it's also to do kisei adam and yom tov. Yafagav the efek kira muchan, who, even though he has efek kira prepared before yom tov, he has what to cover with before yom tov. So the halacha is that it has to be muchan for something that's vadai on yom tov. In order to do kisei adam, it has to be prepared for something that's vadai, not something that's for a suffix. However, if somebody did shechter on yom tov, one may not cover its blood. Although shechting an animal is a malacha, one may shecht the animal for food in yontif, because any type of preparation for eichel nefesh is going to be mutter on yontif. However, if someone shechted a chay or a bird in yontif and becomes mechuyev to cover its blood, he may not use earth for that purpose because moving earth is forbidden under the laws of muktzah. It is permitted to cover the blood with ash taken from one's oven. That's efek kiramuchan, which we mentioned in the Rav. The ash is not muktzah because it was presumably designated by the owner before Yontif for the purpose of covering the blood of the animal that he was going to shecht on Yontif. Nevertheless, the ashes may not be used for a koi because it's assumed that the owner designated only for a regular chaya, whose blood needs kisei adam for vadai, but not for a koi whose blood needs to be covered only misafik. The Mishnah therefore teaches that a koi should not be shechted in Yontif because one would be unable to be yoytze the chiyuv of kisei adam. Furthermore, if someone was over the halacha and shechted the kohen yantiv, you don't do kisei adam. This halacha does not show how a kohen is similar to a chaya. To the contrary, it teaches that they're different because shechting a regular kohen yantiv is mutter. By shechting a kohen yantiv, we know it's asur. The Mishnah includes this point to clarify that although a kohen is like a chaya and that its blood must be covered, it's different from a chaya and that it may not be shechted on yantiv. And the fat of a dead koi transmits the tum of nevela just like the fat of a dead chaya transmits the tumah of nevela. What are we talking about over here? The chaylev behema tahira taharu. The halacha is that the fats that are usher from a behema tahira are tahar. Like the Gemara Psachim and Daf Chav Gimel and Tabn v'chaylev nevela v'chaylev treifa yasal l'chol malacha. The pasuk says that a chaylev nevela and a chaylev treifa is yasal l'chol malacha. So being that over here, meaning, what's the Isra of chaylev? This Isra of chaylev dafka by behema, not by a chaya. Chaylev chaya is mutter. The thing is over here, it's a suffix. So we're not going to be matter the chaylev of something that's a suffix. Mishum the suffix behema v'chel bei tahar. Suffix chaya v'chel bei tamei l'fikach tamasei suffix. So being that if it's a behema, so the chaylev is going to be usher, and then the chaylev is going to be tahar. And if it's a chaya, so the chaylev is going to be tamei, and the chaylev is going to be mutter, but they were metamet besafik. V'tumasa besafik, but the tumah of a dead koi is based on a suffix because a koi might be a behema whose fat is not tamei. The ain poiden by petach hamor, and one may not redeem a firstborn donkey with a koi because the firstborn donkey can be redeemed only with a sheep or a goat, and a koi might be a chaya rather than a sheep or a goat. The Torah commands the owner of a bichor, child of a donkey, to redeem it by giving a sheep or a goat to a koi. Even if a koi is a cross between a sheep and a deer, it may not be used for this purpose because it might belong to the halachic category of a deer. So there's no hachra, and it may be a suffix. It's a suffix says, suffix tzvi, so it won't work for the peter chamor. Mishnah Yud. Keitzad shavel behema. How is a koi similar to a behema? Chelbe also kechel behema. The fat also to be eaten like the fat of a behema, like we just explained. Ein chayav of kares. One who eats the fat of a koi is not going to be chayav kares because it's a suffix. Someone who knowingly committed the sin of eating chaylev is punished by kares. If he was seen by two edim and he was warned by them that eating chaylev is forbidden by the Torah, so then Bezdin gives him malchus. So someone eats chaylev by mistake, he must bring a chatos to be mechaper. Now none of these punishments would apply to someone who ate the chaylev of a koi, because a koi is possibly a chaya whose chaylev is mutter. Ve'ein nilkach bekesef ma'aser lechel b'Yerushalayim. A koi may not be bought with ma'aser sheni in order to be eaten in Yerushalayim, just as a behema may not be bought with ma'aser sheni money in order to be eaten in Yerushalayim unless you're using it as a carbon. B'chayiv Israel l'chayim v'keva. A koi is subject to the halacha of giving the front leg, the cheeks, and the fourth stomach to a kohen, as the case is with any behema. The Torah is mechayiv the bailam of a shechted behema to give its front leg, its cheeks, and the tongue, the cheeks with the tongue, and the fourth stomach to a kohen. Rabbi Lezer Paiter. Rabbi Lezer says that one is not mechuyev to give these parts of a kohen to a kohen, she'amayte mechaver levaraya, because there's a momentous digit in the amalei ba'al behema l'kohen, because the owner of the animal could say to the kohen, I see raya the min behema hu ushkoil. Bring me a raya that this animal is a behema, that you have the right to get Israel l'chaim v'keva. And being they won't be able to bring a raya, so he won't have to give it to him. Halachic Rabbi Lezer, the halachic Rabbi Lezer, and the klal gadol b'dina is hamayte mechaver levaraya. In this case, it's the kohen who wants to take these parts from the owner of the animal. Therefore, in order to receive them, the kohen must prove that a kohen is a behema, which he cannot do. The Tanakam, on the other hand, learns from a pasuk in the Torah that these parts must be given to a kohen, even in the case of a kohen, right? Because the pasuk says, "Im seh," if it's a seh. Why would something not be a seh? Something would not be a seh if it's a crossbreed between a seh and a tzvi, or it's something that the chachamim weren't able to be machriya. So it falls under the category of im seh, if it's a sheep. This thing is mesupik. We are mesupik about what it is. Mishnah Yud Aleph. Keitzad ein eishav v'lo l'chayav v'lo l'behema. How is a kohen not like a chaya or a behema? Also mishum klayim v'machayav v'ma. It's forbidden in Hilchas Klayim to mate a kohen with a chaya or with a behema. A kohen may not be mated with a chaya because it might be a behema, which is forbidden to be crossbred with the chaya, and it also may not be mated with a behema because it might be a chaya. So you can't mate it with anybody. So also mishum klayim v'machayav v'ma behema hakosev chayosoi ubehemtei lebnoi. If someone writes a document, some kind of star, giving his chaya and his behema to his son as a gift, he owns the koi, because the koi is a chaya and a behema. Lo kosav le'as hakoi. Hakosav chayosei behema lebnoi. If someone writes a document giving his chaya and his behema to his son as a gift, and he owns a koi, lo kosav le'as hakoi. He did not assign the koi to the son, because we assume that he meant to include only animals that are definitely chayas, or definitely behemoths, as opposed to a koi, whose status is uncertain. This halacha applies regardless of who gave the gift and who received it. The Mishnah specifies a father and a son in order to teach that although the fathers are usually generous towards their children, it's assumed even in this case the koy was excluded due to the unclarity and the uncertainty of its status. If someone saw a koy and said, I am a nazir, if this is a chaya, or he says, I am a nazir, if this is a behema, a nazir becomes a nazir misafik, because either statement might be true. Furthermore, if he said, I'm a nazir on condition that this is both a chaya and a behema, he becomes a nazir misafik also, because the koy is both a chaya and a behema in the sense that it has the chumrei chaya and chumrei behema, as we learned in the previous Mishnah. If someone said, I'm a nazir on a condition that this is neither a chaya or a behema, he also becomes a nazir misafik, because the koy could be in a category of its own. If it's bir b'fnei atzmai v'le'yachlu hachachamim l'chroya. So the last case mentioned by the Rav illustrates how the Mishnah's opening question, how is a koy not like a chaya or a behema, is, in this case, this is where it's shtelling ois, that he'll be a nazir based on that. V'shar kol drachav shovin l'chayv l'behema. And all other matters, the halachas of a koy are similar to those of chayis and those of behemoths. The halachas applicable to both chayis and behemoths apply to a koy as well. L'ton shchita kazeh kazeh. For example, a koy requires shechting before it may be eaten like a chay and like a behemoth, and tamim mishum nevela. It transmits tumah if it's a nevela. If a koy dies without being shechted, there's a tumas nevela over there, mishum evrim and a chay, and transmits tumah as a limb taken from a living animal. That if an aver was removed from a living koy, so that aver has tumah. Kazeh kazeh, just like a chay and a behemoth transmit tumah when they are dead, or by means of a limb that was removed and it was alive. The Mishnah does not attempt to list all the ways in which a koy is like both a behemoth and a chaya. There are many others. For example, one may not consume the blood of a koy or the meat of a koy that has a treifa. That's a treifa, or an avram and a chay of a koy when it was alive, which is because it's pashut that these things are also sai when it's a behemoth and sai if it's a chaya.